Hello, Gary here, and welcome to Lost Treasure Stories. If you're new to this channel, we have a series of fantastic stories of never before heard of or little known documented lost treasure hoards still waiting to be found in every state. We also feature little known stories of lost treasure found. You'll find each series in our playlist. So if you like stories of lost treasure, this channel is for you. Go ahead and subscribe to our channel so you get notified whenever we post a new video. After all, the next story of a lost treasure hoard still waiting to be found just might be in your own state. And as a gift from us to you, all new subscribers can leave a comment on the area that you live in, and we'll post the story as close to your location as possible. As a new subscriber, you'll have access to our Lost Treasure Stories ebook that we have planned for the future. After you subscribe, be sure to click on the bell to turn on your notification setting, and on to the story.
After a 78-year-old woman died of a heart attack, Vermont authorities arrived at a beat-up old farmhouse in the small town of Orange, Vermont, where the woman and her previously deceased husband had spent their summers. The couple had no survivors, but a will left gifts to more than 50 beneficiaries, many of them religious organizations. The state of Vermont had previously placed a lien on the farm, claiming almost $900,000 in taxes and penalties because the couple had never filed a state tax return. The couple also apparently had never filed a federal tax return, according to a quoted statement from the Internal Revenue Service.
Ladies and gentlemen, the story you are about to hear is true. Only the names have been changed to protect the innocent.
The authorities were stunned to find in the barn a treasure trove that included almost $800,000 in gold bullion, a collection of 42 vintage automobiles, including a 1926 Rolls-Royce, and a one-of-a-kind 1912 Studs Bearcat valued at $200,000. Authorities also found more than $700,000 in promissory notes and contracts, and $80,000 in coins and currency. Another $350,000 worth of real estate deeds, stocks, and other securities were also found. One longtime friend of the deceased couple described them as wonderful people and said, "I'm going to see them in heaven." William J. Bell, a Carroll, Michigan miser, died last week, and a committee was appointed to search his premises for buried wealth. Several hours later, the three men who had been making the search walked into the probate office with an ordinary satchel filled with bank bills and government bonds. A careful account of the contents of the satchel revealed the fact that there was in currency $8,977 worth, in gold coin $870, in U.S. government bonds $3,000, $2,000 which were registered bonds, making a total of $12,847. This money was found buried in 8 different parts of the woodshed in glass fruit jars with the tops tightly screwed on, about a foot below the surface. The bonds were in 1-quart jars, the cash was in pint jars, the bills being carefully rolled, a band being put around each package, on which was marked the amount that each roll contained. The committee is still making vigorous and thorough search for more buried treasure. This lost treasure story was from a newspaper article of June 12, 1903. It's not known if all the money Mr. Bell buried was found. A catch of gold coins uncovered by a bulldozer in Heber, Utah, may yet become the object of a lawsuit. The coins were uncovered during construction of a bowling alley on the site of the former home of George Washington Clyde and Jane McDonald Clyde. The hoard totaled $2,300 in $5, $10, and $20 gold pieces, and family members say it belonged to Jane Clyde. Mrs. C. J. Wilson Hume, a granddaughter of Mrs. Clyde, said her grandmother was known to have converted money from eggs, milk, and vegetable sales in the gold. The subject of grandmother's pot of gold was a family story often discussed, Mrs. Wilson Hume said. When Mrs. Clyde died in 1903, she told the family she had forgotten where she had put her gold hoard. Mrs. Wilson Hume said members of the family and children used to play games looking for the buried treasure. The property was sold by surviving heirs 7 years ago. But now that the money has been found, family members indicated they may have to institute court action to determine ownership. They assert that under Utah's treasure trove law, buried treasure must revert to rightful heirs if such can be established. $60,000 in gold was found by Jesse J. Drew at his sawmill near Hollandale, Washington County, Mississippi. The treasure is supposed to have been buried during the Civil War by Captain Barfield. Ever since the death of Benton Fordyce, the well-known and eccentric bachelor of York Run, Pennsylvania, treasure seekers have been off and on looking for the treasure which he is supposed to have left behind him concealed in some out-of-the-way place. Most of those searching parties have of course worked secretly, each attempting to locate the hoard without letting the fact become known. It is now supposed that the buried wealth has at last been discovered and removed. This discovery was made Saturday night, and the whole talk of Smithfield and vicinity today is about the finding of the notable bachelor's buried treasure. 2 men who reside in this place were the first to learn that the hoard had been found and carried away. The 2 men in question had been among the most persistent and earnest of the treasure hunters. They went out as usual Saturday night and journeyed to the premises of the deceased bachelor Benton. Just inside the garden gate they discovered a new hole in the ground. Beside this was an empty paint keg and a heavy canvas sack. The paint keg had been thoroughly covered within and without with a coating of pitch to preserve it and had originally been buried in the ground. On the old Rupert homestead, just west of Argentine, Kansas, was found a pot of gold on Saturday, and by actual count the pot contained nearly $5,000 in coins ranging from $1 up to $20. John Rupert and James Holloway were excavating for a barn foundation on the site of an old stable. Rupert's pick struck something hard, and a few moments' work disclosed an iron kettle of about 5 gallons capacity and covered with an iron lid. When the lid was finally knocked off, a shining heap of gold was revealed. Many of the coins were of dates preceding the Mexican War, and none were later than 1854. It is believed that the pot of gold was buried by the owner of the homestead during the troubled border times preceding the opening of the Civil War, and it is probable that the owner was killed. As a side note, there is always a chance that more lost treasure can be found at any site where treasure was already found, because people usually had no way of knowing if they had found it all or not. So it's never a bad idea to check those sites again. This article was published in the New York Times November 4, 1890. Excitement prevails at Cummer, Alabama, over the unearthing of buried gold on the sea plantation tended exclusively by blacks. 2 white men, strangers, appeared there and, after making inquiries descriptive of the locality as it stood 35 years ago, went to an old landmark and measured to a spot where they commenced digging. They soon took up a box and left with it, remarking to the black man who had shown them the landmark that the box contained $20,000. John W.C. once owned the plantation. He died in a Confederate hospital in Mississippi in 1862 and is known to have had money which has never been accounted for. This newspaper article is from July 21, 1897. As a side note to this story, John C. was a plantation owner. The newspaper article stated that the plantation was, quote, worked exclusively by blacks. The article didn't mention, of course, that the blacks were enslaved and mistreated human beings. The article also says that John C. died in a Confederate hospital in Mississippi in 1862, which is highly unlikely since he died before the Civil War. He died in 1859 in Barber County, Alabama, and is buried in the Sea Cemetery in Bullock County, Alabama. His gravesite as well as his headstone can be viewed at findagrave.com.